Okay, thank you everyone. My name is Laki Sideris. My formal education was in the physical sciences, and I have a day job in information management. But I also take photos and I make wine in my backyard in Thornbury. And I'd like to acknowledge that that's actually on Wurundjeri country. I like taking photos and I like making wine. I like doing these things so much. I did a little project for the Darebin FUSE festival in 2021 to photograph and document local backyard winemakers living in the city of Darebin, which culminated in an event. Then the event was a screening of my photos, a lunch. The winemakers had a chance to meet up, and there was a great community warmth. It was a great day. Whole families turned up. This is a photo I took of Vince, one of the winemakers. This project made me think more closely about why I'm attracted to making photos and making wine. What is it about making stuff that is so appealing? Why do we make stuff that we could easily buy or just look at in a gallery? Why is money the last thing we think about when we truly get into making things? Is being an amateur less of a thing than being a pro? How do you judge the quality of the thing after you've made it? Why do you even judge quality? The word amateur is derived from the word love. This presentation is about makers who don't do the thing they do for money. So this presentation is a presentation about love. I will draw upon the perspectives of an amazing group of passionate winemakers who are in love with their passion, love with their practice, and in there somewhere I'll weave in a little bit of my story in winemaking. I'll also try to describe what keeps us amateur winemakers going. It may get a little personal and a little cheesy, probably quite a bit cheesy, but I will take that risk. And who knows, maybe we will all become winemakers. So here is me and my kid being amateur winemakers. Here is some love. When I made the photos, it was not vintage time, so there was not much wine-making activity to shoot. So I just visited the makers' houses and, with their permission, took some pictures of whatever was in front of me. That's Antonia, Mateo's wife. And here is Mateo and his twin brother, Nazario.
63.
We got married.
Longer time.
It was a big fun. There's two brothers here. I've got the tent. I'll make it here and there, because what I'll do, I'll get the press from there, something across the road, and got the wheels on. Bring the press here, do it here. He does it over there. We are twins, me and my brother, Xavier. And that's why we come to be always close by together. Wherever he went, I went. Wherever I went, he went. Yeah. Normally we put that on the wheelbarrow and this on the phone. That's what we should do.
When we do something here, you're not going to put it aside. We're going to put it.
That's just a matter of balancing it. We were put together at the same time, but not together. Yeah. I was born about 45 minutes earlier. I came here in 1953. You know? No.
1947 we came here.
No, in this house.
We said 1963, sorry.
1963. Yeah. That's when I got married. Yeah. When I got married.
1947, 1963, dates and events punctuate their conversation. Time passes. The houses are also part of the practice. The houses are part of the making practice. Even the street becomes part of the making process. Home is where I store my wine press. Place is very important, your winemaking place. And here is me visiting my mother's vineyard in the old country as a 23-year-old backpacker. I mean, not all of that vineyard was my mother's, just what's between those trees, but the village you see behind, that's called Dragono. It's on the island of Lefkada in Greece. My parents grew and made wine, not as amateurs, but not professionally either. They did it amongst all the other agrarian activities they did to get by. So we continued the process here in Melbourne, in Thornbury. We had about 40 vines in the backyard at one point. But this was not a tradition that my parents brought back. They were too busy working and doing real stuff. We did have a few eating grapevines, a sultana, 2 tops of muscat, but that was food. My sojourn to the old country inspired me to convince my mother to take over the backyard and plant a whole vineyard. So how do you know how to plant a vineyard? I asked my parents, but they couldn't really see the point as they didn't drink much after 25 years being in Australia. My mother preferred to have a tomato or a zucchini harvest. So I wrote a letter to the CSIRO and asked them. Who else? This was 1993, people still wrote letters. And lo and behold, they wrote back in a fat envelope full of photocopies and handwritten notes. Who were these people? I'm pretty sure they were librarians. And they suggested 2 books. Viticulture Volume 2, Practices by Coombe and Dry, and Making Good Wine by Rankin. These 2 books were my education, and these 2 books were going to make me a vigneron and a winemaker. Thank God for librarians. Okay, so quickly, how is wine made? Well, you need some grapes. A kilogram of grapes roughly equates to about 600 millilitres of wine. So if you want a bottle of wine, 750 mils, you want about 1.2 kilos. You crush the grapes and you put them in a big bucket. Just a note, at every single stage where air comes in contact with either juice or wine, add the antioxidant sulfur dioxide to minimise spoilage, but I will return to this. You ferment the grape juice by adding yeast, which converts the sugars, the juice's sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide gas, and you can see the fizzing in that right picture there. And for red wine, the colour comes from the skin. So soaking the skins with the juice extracts colour. For white wine, you skip this step. So once you are happy with the colour, you press. And you press the skins from which are in the bucket, and then you transfer the liquid to a vessel with an airlock to finish the fermentation. And that silver vessel you see in the right-hand corner, that's the vessel. And then you wait. After the fermentation finishes, after a couple of weeks, the dead yeast will sink to the bottom along with all the other gunk, and the top of the liquid is clear. And what we do is we remove, by siphoning off or pumping off the clear liquid into a clean vessel. And here you'll see a red bucket there. That's because we're transferring it from that silver stainless steel vessel into that bucket, that back again, because we've only got one stainless steel vessel. And then you store it. So that's the most expensive bit of equipment I've got, actually. Those stainless steel vessels. That you can actually keep them there indefinitely because it's an airtight lid. It's actually got a floating lid with a pneumatic seal, so you can actually reduce the height of that lid as you drink the wine. Currently, it's a 200 millimetre vessel. I've got 100 litres of Grenache in there, which of the other 100 I've drunk this year, and the other one's got about 100 of Mataro in there. You can keep it in there, and you can keep it in there as long as you like. Really, that's probably the worst aspect, actually, because you've got wine on tap, and it's in the backyard. And look, it's a good thing. I'm just saying that it can be problematic. And then you can bottle at some stage. It's a good idea because when something's in a bottle, you're committed to, you've got to think about it, pop the lid, and then you've got to, drink it. Maybe with friends, as opposed to just, a tap. And then maybe you can make some wacky labels and they make good presents if you have friends. But, okay, let's go back to the story. So, with scientific advice from Cumin Dry, we planted 12 grapevines. We tried Shiraz, Chardonnay, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon. Merlot was not too successful, but the others thrived. Grapevines are like weeds. They just grow anywhere. And we grew more from the cuttings. We harvested them and they were crushed with food-safe certified gumboots in a little trough my father built. So now, like Matteo and Nazario, I had my winemaking place as well. And here is Rocco. He has his winemaking place.
Need to go on the bottom of the head.
Watch your head when you go under.
This, only I make my wine. Nearly 70 years I make wine.
Since then he's been making his own wine. 1970, when we got married.
Yes, September.
In 1 week he dug it out.
A jackhammer.
A jackhammer and
All about it.
and he used to dump it because there was a mountain of dirt over there.
Yeah, and the first of May, 1966. This is the town where I come from. Australis. It's a drop from a rocket or letter. Cheers.
Rocco digs out his winemaking place with a jackhammer in a week. I'm not sure if it was conscious of the flexing, but I sure encouraged it. And again, making wine was pinned to a place, to a milestone, coming to Australia, getting married, 1966, 1970, time and place. I tried Rocco's wine, and it reminded me of something the father of a girl I once tutored in maths told me. We were trying to solve a quadratic equation, and the father was forcing me to try his homemade wine. He was very proud of it. I took the glass, sniffed, and had a sip. I could not help screwing up my face. Goes well with Coca-Cola, the father said. He was beaming. He loved his wine. And yes, to be committed to anything, you must love it. That's the driving factor in anything, I guess. But it's much easier to love something that is not pushing you away. So while many things may go better with Coke, I wanted to make a wine that could be easy to love. So I tried to make it the way I was trained to do it. I did it scientifically. I was back in the lab. And the good thing about not being in school is that you can be as messy as you like, and I'm very messy. I added chemicals, I measured, I tracked, I plotted, I tried to find relationships, I tried to apply the theoretical model onto the data. I applied the theory, but sometimes the wine just needed the Coke. I tried to love it, but it was pushing me away. I realised that backyard winemaking is a little different to the industrial practice described in the Rankin book I studied. There are two secrets here. Well, they're not actually secrets because they're in the book, but they have primacy, and it's all the science you really need. The smaller the volume of liquid, the greater the surface area to volume ratio there is, and avoid oxidation as much as you can. The first point makes the second point more difficult because there's more relative surface area that can react with air. So if you make small amounts of wine, try your hardest to get the air out and use the chemical potassium metabisulfate. This provides the sulfur dioxide. Well, it's a preservative, 220, that you read on the back of wine labels and on packets of apricots, dried apricots. It's an antioxidant. It's the free sulfur binds to oxygen in the wine and stops it from spoiling. Like, it's good stuff, Great stuff. The Egyptians were using it 4,000 years ago, so it's okay. And you can tell which backyard winemakers opt for a pure natural wine free from preservatives. It's usually oxidizer smells like vinegar or nail polish remover. So for small volumes, you definitely need sulfur dioxide. And getting a storage enclosure that actually seals is the best investment. And that's all you need to know. All other knowledges have diminishing returns. In this way, you participate in an age-old practice that resembles a 1-year-long cooking session. It's very grounding. It gives something, and gives you something to do all year round. You go out to the shed, you take a sample, look at the colour, you sniff, taste, add a bit of sulphur to freshen it up a bit, and then you just wait. Actually, there's a third thing you need. You need good grapes to start with. So while our 40 vines produced about 50 kilograms of Chardonnay, Shiraz, some Cabernet, it's actually hard to grow them well in a backyard in Thornbury. El Niño years especially are bad, with mould a constant threat, and there are birds and possums and so on. And you can see in the picture sometimes there was individual berries that we were harvesting. So we started buying grapes as well as growing them. There are drop-off points throughout the northern suburbs during vintage. So we made greater volumes and the quality shot up. And then I had a kid, and it's all hands on deck. I love this process. I get the communal feels of people getting together, getting their hands dirty. It's a very visceral activity. The visceral nature of it is very rewarding. It gives back. And while my own group of enthusiastic helpers is quite small, I do find it a very connecting activity to do with my son. Every year we collect grapes, we crush grapes, we press grapes, and we wait. He has long loved the squishy nature, a little more than me, but in many ways it's a very similar connection I had with my mother when she was still able to work the backyard vineyard. And here is Dennis. He has no problem finding a community of helpers. After my mother could not take care of the vineyard, we got rid of it. It was a lot of work for her, but it was what gave me and her a connection. We would debate pruning principles or grafting methodologies. She was usually right, and through those discussions and walks in that 40-vine vineyard, I felt a connection to others before me. That land on the old country, which I first visited as a tourist, actually felt more real after I walked the narrow gaps between the vines here in the backyard in Thornbury. And now, even with my mother's passing, that connection is still there. It's profoundly felt. I remember where each vine was planted, which cane my father grew to create a new trunk. And I recall Roland Barthes' idea of the punctum, the jolting recognition of the undeniable authenticity of an object, or indeed a person in the photograph. You're arrested and transfixed to the recognition of realness. The dead come back to life, the land, the practice, the craft, and as in the photograph, it keeps the dead alive. It creates that connection beyond mere nostalgia. The process of making wine evokes the many hands and lives that crushed, that pressed, that pruned, and indeed drank the wine. And there is a desire to fall and to be immersed and to perpetuate the practice. It's a resonance that transcends the moment and you as ego. It's a conduit to continuum, and you are embraced with a profound feeling of belonging, even if you're quite alone. Vince is amazing. He makes his wine himself, he drinks it himself. His family kind of lost interest in it some time back, but he's still at it. And his wine does not need Coca-Cola to be loved.
A lot of work. Bit good, but I enjoy myself. I'm 58 years. I've done my wine for 58 years. I've been 61 in Australia, 62 in Australia. I come in under 54. That time I'm 85 there. I come in 17 years old. And after 3-4 years, I started to do my own wine, I make wine, homemade wine. I never stop. Every year I do my wine. Okay, that's when I come in Australia. Look. That's the other brother, my cousin, maybe. I drink one bottle of wine every day. Yeah, because a couple of glasses in lunch, a couple of glasses at the night, that's it, it's finished. Beautiful.
That's Vince. I mean, he's amazing. He actually won the prize this year for the Meet the Makers FUSE wine festival thing that they do in the area. So that was like 3 years ago. So it'd be 88 now. So the only thing that's wrong with him is getting a gut. But that's all. That's the only negative thing I can think of this practice.
What a talk. I have so many questions. Firstly, what's your favourite type of wine?
My favourite type of wine?
Yeah.
Favourite type of wine? It's usually the one that I'm drinking. I've actually gone simpler. I like simple wines. I used to like I did all the all that stuff, going to the wineries. Now, it's the wine that I'm drinking is the one that I like. I'm not being
just any
flippant.
wine.
I'm much as long as it doesn't do that.
As long as you don't have to add Coke to it to taste it.
I don't have to. I prefer the lighter varieties now than the heavy ones that I used to like.
A good Pinot Noir or something.
All of it. Yeah.
We might get some house lights, and if anyone has a question, I'll be taking questions. Yep, right at the front here.
I love your work, man. Respect, first of all. Because I make wine, I made some batches.
Ooh, we have a winemaker in the room.
Cool.
First question is, do you use the acid to the lower the pH?
Technical question.
So do you add any acid to lower the pH?
It's a good question actually, because they don't tell you this. They don't tell you this when you go to a shop, right? Mm. But I mean, it's a telling question, and I should take 2 seconds to, because when you grow grapes, what happens is they as they ripen, sugars increase and acids decrease, right? And in Australia, what happens is when you go in the Barossa Valley, whatever it is, there's so much heat, they ripen it all up to whatever it is, and you get these really big wines, but if they've got no acid, and you need the acid for the balance. So in Australia, it's just part of what they do is they add acid to bring it up. Because whereas in Europe, it's colder, acid levels are more natural. They don't add acid, but
so they don't add acid.
But they add sugar. So whatever to get the alcohol up. But the thing is, so what with me, yes, depends where it comes from. So if these grapes that you saw in those big boxes, they actually came from Redmark. Exactly. When we were growing in the backyard, I don't know, you saw a little chart there. I was charting the acid sugar ratio, try to get that balance right because. You try not to do it, but it doesn't hurt. It's just a little tweak.
Just a tweak. Does anyone else have a question? Oh, you have another one. Go for it.
Anyway,
2 more.
we'll have a drink later on.
Lucky will be here all night.
What do you think of wild yeast?
What do you think of wild yeast?
Well, look, you can do that thing, that ratio thing, right? That it goes, if you make a lot of something, right, it's so much easier to do. If you do small batches, like my parents actually did use wild yeast because that's the way they usually did it. You know, in the old days, just because there's yeast on the berry, right? There's yeast on the berry, but it's all over the place, and some are horrible, and it's potluck what you get. So what they do now, the common practice is you just kill that yeast, and then you inoculate it with a Western cultured yeast, and you get rid of the indigenous yeasts, right? So it's a bit it's really a colonial approach, literally, and they use those words. So those words are actually used. They're a cultured yeast and they're indigenous yeast, and you inoculate the. It's quite interesting, and so there's a whole thing now of bringing back the indigenous yeast. But if you've got to do that with so much quality control and so much, you've got to know what you're doing, basically. So if you're going to do it like this, stick with the Western fascist colonial yeasts, and you'll be right.
All right, we'll see if anyone has a question. If not, we'll come back to your third question. Does anyone else? I can't see. Yep, right at the back there. Is soil contamination an issue?
Not me personally, no. Because,
it's very pure soil.
Because it's like the variables. The biggest thing you're worrying about is birds eating your grapes. You know what I mean? That's then you go down kind of like but yeah, not really. I mean, Thornbury soils, like the suburban soils. I don't think there wasn't much industry where I am. It's mainly clay, really. It's really. Yeah.
Any other questions out there? Oh, yep, I can see it back there. Do you sell your wine?
Good question. Look, I did.
Did you bring any trials for us tonight? Or?
I've got some in the back there for people.
Oh, you do?
But no, look, people want to buy stuff. I found that really amazing, actually. I did that when I mentioned that Vince won that award. I had a tasting there as well. I was pouring things. And people kept on coming up to me asking me to buy the wine. I'm like, why? It's not that great. Just go to the shop and buy a $10 bottle. It's the same thing. But people just want to buy this stuff. I find it actually amazing. And I'm not actually sure what the law is,
Don't ask
because
me.
I think you've got to label it so you don't kill people. You've got to put a label at the back. You've got to do something on the label. I don't know what you do. So
just stick it on the shelf at Dan Murphy's.
I took the orders, but I haven't,
It's all right, we won't tell the ATO. Any other questions? Yep.
Yeah, I was wondering, have you noticed climate change affecting the way that you grow and make wine?
Oh, good question. Has climate change affected it?
Not in my period, because it's more those El Nino things that when you look at, actually, another great question, actually, because when people look at vintages numbers, you go, the 98 was great, the 97 was rubbish. That's because that happens in those, kind of like El Nino years, when it's a lot of very wet years. Dry years, you don't worry about it, it's all good. And that's why Australian wine's so good, because in the Barossa it's always a dry year, whereas in Europe, those fluctuations they're more there. So when you have to worry, that's when you worry about vintages. In Australia, it's pretty good wine most of the time. So that's going to even out, right? So all of that's just going to warm up. So those regions where it is a bit dicey year to year because of wet weather and so on, if that dries up, or if you get the monsoons coming, massive changes, and you'll see they're making wine now in the UK. You know what I mean? So
maybe the planet warming has an upside.
It's going to change. It's ridiculous.
We might take your very last question, or has he answered it? We'll chat later. Is there any other burning questions for Laki? If not, we'll let him go. Yes, I can see one at the back there.
I just have a question about the legalities around people wanting to buy craft brewed wine, completely identify with being a passionate craft brewer that wants to sell things and the government steps in and says it's illegal. So at the end of the day, supply is an issue. Supplying anything over 0.5% alcohol is illegal.
Right.
So I was just wondering, is it all, because we're all craft brewing and it's all like families and having fun, the government sort of turns a blind eye to it? Is that
I don't know about the selling thing. I just don't know about it. I know one of the guys. You saw that Dennis guy. He's got an industrial winery in Thornbury. See all those tanks. You can sort of see these tanks in the background there. He makes bucket loads of this stuff, and he gets orders from all his relatives. So his relatives would say, I want, give me, 50 litres of a rosé. Somebody's going to say, give me, 100 litres of a Shiraz. And he fills those orders for them. Does he sell them? Is it on the books? Who knows? I don't know. I'm not, I didn't want to ask those questions just in case, I get called up.
And I might ask the very last question. Do you live by what Vince says? A bottle of wine a day, keep the doctor away?
I can't do that now. I mean, in my lower moments, maybe. But
so maybe it'll make you happier if you do.
Look, I'm only 57. You know what I mean?
So you've got a few years to catch up to Vince.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, agreed.
Plenty of time to.
So if you all join me in thanking Laki again.